Barbers have one of the most respected hustles in prison because everybody needs a haircut, especially under the old rules where your hair could only be a quarter-inch long. The guys who had longer hair than that were stuck in segregation, sometimes for decades. The prisons were required to provide haircuts as part of the hygiene program, so they would hire barbers, but they weren't always the person you would want to cut your hair. They may not be clean, they may not take care of the equipment, or they may not know what they were doing. So a lot of times there were guys who did haircuts as a hustle. They would either borrow equipment from the main barber, or they would use the small beard trimmers they sold us on property, where they would actually use a razor blade inside a comb for edge-ups and for fades. And I remember the first time I saw somebody getting ready to cut hair with a comb and a razor blade, and I was like, is he getting ready to Sweeney Todd this guy? But of course the rules say you weren't allowed to cut anybody else's hair unless you were the barber, and you weren't allowed to have anybody else cut your hair. In some places you weren't even allowed to cut your own hair, and one guy got in trouble for that. So the guys who did haircuts as a hustle had to know which staff was going to be on and where they could get away with it. Some would try to cut on the yard, but that would lead to problems because the camera, or who was in the tower, or who was paying attention, so a lot of times they would just do it in the pod. And even there, sometimes they'd get in trouble, so they'd do it in the cell.